And we're live. We apologize for being a few minutes late. It's the things that happen in live streaming. Hey, welcome to ScaleUp Heroes, where we bring the best minds with the best real-life experiences when it comes to scaling up businesses. These are the heroes that took on the difficult odds, and they are living to tell the tale. I'm your host, Randy Cantrell. And to all of our viewers, we would like to invite you to visit our website, ScaleUpAcademy.io. Today, we're discussing scaling up sales. And I'd like to bring in now the moderator of today's program, Tommy Taylor. He's a manager of sales operations at Santa Commerce. Tommy, we appreciate you and all the panelists today, so I'll turn the mic over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Randy. It's great to be here today. I thought we could kind of just start off the session just by letting each panelist introduce themselves. So just a few, maybe 30, 60 seconds. What their experience is, what their role is, a little bit about the company. So maybe Spencer, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, definitely. So Spencer Wiedeman, I've been at Talkdesk for 4 years now and manage the EMEA sales team here, both for account executives and SDRs. I joined the company about 4 years ago, starting actually as an individual contributor when the team was about 10 people and growing today to a little bit over 300 globally on the team. Previously, I was at a company called RelateIQ, which was acquired by Salesforce, which is where I first started in sales, but have been growing out the team here in Europe for about a year now.
Very nice. Well, thanks for joining us, Spencer. Joachim, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Joachim, head of sales at Zeitgold. Before Zeitgold, I was responsible for sales at a retail analytics company called MyNotes, which was recently acquired by Telefonica last year, basically. Prior to that, I led the international expansion at Orderbird, which is an iPad POS company. And at Zeitgold, we automate bookkeeping, payroll, and related tasks for SMBs. And basically, we save them roughly 10 to 15 hours time per week on these tasks because this is really takes a lot of time for SMBs. Actually, we are kind of fairly young still. We are roughly, last year we started going to market to figure out and improve product market fit. And now we are right in the beginning of scaling our growth engine. And we are roughly 60 employees right now in Berlin and Tel Aviv.
Okay, very nice. Well, thanks for joining as well. And then finally, last but not least, we have Pedro.
Hi, I'm Pedro. I'm VP of Strategy and Monetization of Aptoide. Aptoide is an Android app store with an alternative to Google Play. I'm in charge of the monetization efforts for both ad networks and for developer services. Prior to Aptoide, I joined Aptoide last month. Prior to Aptoide, I've been working at McKinsey & Company for the last 7 years and helping early stage startups in a pro bono basis on marketing and sales topics.
Okay, very nice. Well, thank you for joining. Just a little bit about myself. So further to what Randy said, I am working for the Rotterdam, Netherlands-based Santa Commerce, currently doing sales operations. Prior to that, my experience has been more in North American companies looking to expand out globally. So first with a Canadian company and then with the Silicon or San Francisco-based Double Dutch. And so it's learning a lot about the strategies that work in Silicon Valley, that make Silicon Valley companies what they are. And so now kind of working from the European perspective to try and bring in a lot of those scaling up methodologies to this world here. So yeah, getting into it. So we kind of spoke a little bit earlier and we thought we wanted to focus on 3 different topics. So we have the first topic being a little bit about focus in scaling up. The second one is then finding the right and attracting the right talent to bring onto your sales team. Finally, we want to explore a little bit on what you can do for coaching and development of that team. So you're building that team the way you want to build it. But before we get into that, maybe we could just have a very broad question up first. Pedro, since you're right there, do you have any words to say on, maybe what scaling up means to you? Do you have specific methodologies that you've used before that just helps to focus the team as you go through this high growth period?
Sure. So more specifically for Aptoide, we have been able to get the early dollars in our bank accounts mostly from the advertising side. So app developers that want to sponsor the app so that they show first. We managed to grow this business, and now we are very focused on doing the in-app building, where typically in this industry is where the money is. And in the last 2 years, we've been trying to make in-app building successful, but unfortunately not. So scaling for us mean to launch a new product that will be core on our effort, in our value proposition, and specifically having a clear value proposition for developers, which has not been in the focus.
And Joachim, do you have anything to add yourself?
Yeah. So we are looking at it in a slightly different way. We are actually thinking about the scaling or the phase of scaling that we first need sort of the permission to scale. This is a signal that we either get internally or externally, or both actually. So externally, we see some traction on the product. We see that customers are using it and they can use it in a way that we feel like that is scalable and that really helps them. They love the product. They probably talk about it already a bit. Then we have an internal permission sort of that we can actually scale. So internal processes work, right? And then we have to be able to scale. So not only processes in onboarding, customer success, work, but also in the growth engine work. So basically we can acquire enough leads. We have a customer activation process, what we call it internally, that can be scaled. And once we have these two things, the internal and external signal, we are able to scale. Then we basically want to scale the growth team by basically hiring a lot of people, making sure that we don't only increase sales on a total number, but also per individual. And this is, I think, the most important thing to me. Scaling means that we increase the team size and make sure that they are getting more efficient. Right?
Absolutely. And I have heard CEOs mention that as a big challenge of theirs, is understanding the balance between these teams. So if you're looking at the marketing, if you're looking at the sales, you're looking at customer success, to name a few, understanding where the bottlenecks are and where to invest that money moving forward is a large part of their role.
Yeah.
And then Spencer, at Talkdesk, are you any specific methodologies you're using, or what's the scaling up mean for you there? That's just on mute.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Tommy.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably in a little bit of a different phase than where like Joachim's at with Zeitgold in terms of having that validation from the market. So I've been there at Talkdesk where it was early on getting those validations, kind of bring that all into the fold and understanding how to position for that next evolution. I think where we're at now is how do we figure out how to expand our footprint in Europe, become more proactive in the market, and that's what I'm focused on. But also doing that not just from a geo perspective, but also in terms of product. So launching new products and having new bundles around how we talk about the products, and doing that both with existing accounts and scaling that with the accounts that we have on the customer success side, but also how do we identify highly likely candidates to go buy based on what we know about our customer base. And that's when it becomes less of, I'd say, qualitative gut feel and more of a quantitative. We know that we win with these types of customers. We know that we need to go direct or higher, and this is how we actually build that process and plug people in to be successful. So I'd say that's really kind of the big focus for us from a methodology perspective. The only thing I'd add is that outside of using a lot of the data that we have, what we always try to push our SDRs on is how do we build micro strategies every day to test a new vertical or to test a new market segment. So whether that's going after insurance next week or going after banking or going after any of these different non-core customer bases, so we can start to push on the market and see what's out there for us.
Very nice, and I think that's a great segue into our first topic. So if we go into the topic of focus, One quote that I love saying, and I think I'm starting to risk saying it too much because I apply it to everything, but it's a Churchill quote where he says, "You never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks." And I love that quote because I think it relates very well to sales, where as a salesperson, if you stop and throw a rock at every barking dog, it's kind of the idea you're trying to appeal to everyone, and you're taking your focus after going after the companies and the customers that you know are going to be very effective. So Spencer, you mentioned that you're kind of now looking to come into Europe. So of course you're coming over from San Francisco, you're going to Portugal. What considerations are you taking as you're going into new markets, new countries?
Yeah, so kind of to start off with that piece, we actually decided to strategically move from a reactive focus on the European market to more proactive, having people in market when we had a very clear vision of what our ICP or kind of our ideal customer would look like. And so for us, we have personas both on an individual level in the company, but also have almost personas for companies that we know we can go win in. There's things that are early indicators for us that increase the propensity to buy for our customers. So for us, it's, do you use Salesforce, Zendesk, or Microsoft? Because with Talkdesk, we integrate out of the box with that, and it makes it incredibly easy. So there's a value proposition, what Pedro was mentioning before, that's crystal clear. And so when we think about it, we focus entirely on high level, what customers do we want to work with, and then we go find the people inside those accounts that are interesting to talk to. But really it comes down to focus on companies and then also focus on geographies as well, just based on the complexities of Europe and selling in different languages and having kind of even post-sales support as well for these different languages. So it's really focus on the companies and then focus on the territories.
And Joachim, I know, you're in a country that a lot of companies do want to sell into, where everyone looks at the German market and sees it as very lucrative. Being on the other side, how do you kind of go about considering what markets, what countries do you want to focus on?
Yeah. So in my current role, I think we are, due to the topic, we are only focusing on Germany at this point, because this is typically a highly regulated market in each country, and it's totally different. Like bookkeeping standards are very different in every market, and also payroll. And therefore we focus a lot on getting things right now in Germany. Prior to that, I led the internationalization at a different market, and I think in general there is so many amazing opportunities in terms of new markets and new segments. But as long as you didn't really figure out your home turf, let's put it like that, it doesn't really make sense to expand your scope. This is really really crucial, I think. Before you can actually scale to other markets, you have to be able, or you have to have figured out to scale in your home markets. And I think this is something very, very important. As Spencer said earlier, they are in a different stage right now. And I think with scaling, you also have to think in a way that, you do that over and over again. And probably from 1 to 10 million ARR, and then from 10 to 50 or 50 to 100 million ARR. That is always, again, scaling, but on a totally different process, totally different requirements that you have there. And I think it's the same with going to different markets. You have to start with the first one, and then you incrementally test. And then if a test really works, then you go on, scale there, and then do that over and over again, repeatedly.
And I know Spencer mentioned a little bit about micro strategies, kind of going after specific segments. Do you have something similar in place where you're testing out kind of the value proposition against specific verticals, or how do you come up with that focus there?
Yeah, right now we don't do that. We test a lot. We test a lot of in terms of like which kind of pricing really works, We test a lot in terms of like how do we want to split up the process, the sales process itself, which task the SDR team takes over and which task the AE team takes over. But right now we don't test other markets because we know quite well which markets work and which markets don't work, which is something that we did last year. We acquired lots of customers from lots of different backgrounds. And then we figured out for whom of them the product really worked and where we had difficulties due to some requirements that are really specific to this industry, for example. Now we know that quite well, and we want to scale on that for probably at least the next 3 to 4 quarters, and then probably iterate on that, and then actually add new markets or segments.
Nice. And Pedro, how are you kind of determining where to put your focus in terms of whether it be segments in verticals, whether it be markets, countries?
Yeah, so for us, there is millions app developers, but revenue is very concentrated on top developers. So we are aiming first to understand exactly what these top developers are interest because money is there, but we are being very focused on app developers that are already working with other app stores, Samsung apps, Amazon, Café Bazaar, and so on. Because if they are already with others, we know that they are more likely to do it. We don't need to convince them to do it, first. And second, we are also looking for apps that are very focused on acquiring users, because at the beginning, what we can provide them is downloads. We can generate a lot of downloads. We can promote them. And so we are looking for the ones that are really keen on getting users and they accept in exchange to integrate with our SDK.
Okay. And then if we want to kind of expand the conversation a little bit onto the marketing side. So I know 2 of the companies I've worked for in the past, the one was very strong on the marketing side where, they had this very strong lead generation process in place. And as a result, we could fulfill a whole team of SDRs just basically following up on marketing leads. And that's what we were doing. And because of that, it was a little bit of a lack of focus where, we were focused on every company that had a human resources department, which is every company out there. Sure. And then going to my next company, it was very much the opposite, where we were entirely focused on sales development, and we had that outbound approach into going after the companies that we wanted to focus on. What do you think is the right balance between the two, or what have you seen work in your company?
Yeah, so in my company, in Aptoide, we have been very focusing on acquiring users. So the marketing department has been very focused on increasing the user base, both organically, but also getting other partners such as OEMs and telcos to also distribute Aptoide in their phones. Now we are creating and scaling the monetization team that has a relationship with developers. And this team, what we see that works the best, as we have very concentrated revenue in top developers and a very long tail, what we have seen is controlling this relationship with top developers, so owning the process and spending a lot of time in taking care, understanding their needs, and also learning from that. And towards the long tail, we have not been focused a lot, mostly just as we have such a large user base, we got those guys, and now we have to think what ways we can monetize them, but not a priority.
Certainly. And Spencer, you spoke a little bit earlier about, I mentioned the micro strategies where you're going after specific segments. Where do you see this balance coming in between the outbound sales development efforts versus the marketing inbound efforts?
Yeah, so I think it depends company to company. So I think probably Zeitgold going after SMB versus mid-market is probably a different strategy than what we would deploy at Talkdesk. Early on, we were very, very heavy on inbound marketing, and it's always nice to have inbound leads coming in. But we definitely have a focus on outbounding and specifically going after those ICPs and those target customers that we know, A, we can win, and B, we can provide value at. So I think those are hugely important. Inbound is always great. I find sometimes when you are trying to go after mid-market and enterprise companies, it can be a little bit distracting because you have a ton of inbound volume, but it's not necessarily who you want to be talking to. And to your quote earlier, I think the focus of a sales team, particularly when it comes to AE's time and those calories that you spend with customers that will talk to you but won't actually move the needle, they can be very dangerous when you think about an early team, or with us here with just our first founding core account executives. It's really important for us to focus. So that's where I think I tend to skew more towards outbounding and finding the customers that fit the profile and fit the strategy that we want to go execute on.
And I think you make a great point there where it is different for every company. If I talk about the marketing company, we were more mid-market focused. So those inbound leads were more a reflection of helping us identify the companies when there's thousands of companies out there, versus going very sales development when you're going after very enterprise, where it's a lot easier to understand what your territory look like.
For sure. And much of our focus now is on branding and building kind of the name in the market. So whether it's like Magic Quadrant with Gartner or Dreamforce, field events and being involved in world tours with Salesforce, it's more about building the presence in the market, because these are 3 to 5 year buying cycles when it comes to call center software. So you're not going to get somebody that comes on inbound and wants to buy 500 seats tomorrow. It's a process that takes time, and it has to do with building in the market and growing that way.
And Joachim, what do you see this balance being between the two?
Yeah. Actually, it's quite interesting. At the company before that I worked at before MeNotes, we also mostly worked with the largest retailers in Europe. So also very heavily enterprise focused. And we also had an SDR team that had a vastly larger role in the lead generation, but also qualification. Right now, when we talk about lead generation, we are focusing literally 100% on marketing. We get 100% inbound leads at this point. This will change probably in the future as well, but this is the current status. And however, we do lead generation 100% through that. Lead qualification is something totally different, and we have an SDR team that focuses on that, and it is quite complex to figure out the lead quality, whether we can and want to provide our services to this certain lead, which is an important part in our business, actually, whether we want to do it. And this is something that we are really focusing on in the SDR team right now. So it's not so much about lead qualification, but we also work heavily with a SDR team. And we are currently trying to figure out which roles we can, or which tasks can be actually front-loaded to the marketing team in order to be more efficient. But this is the current status.
So I think that's a very good point that you make too, where I think I have spoken to some senior executives like CEOs that don't quite understand, well, if it's an inbound lead and they're coming on our website and filling out a form, then why don't we just send it to the salesperson because it's a good lead? Yeah. But it is very important to understand, there is a quality part, and in the past I've seen these leads even convert as little as 25 to 30%, where maybe they don't realize what they're signing up for, or maybe they're just completely not a fit for what it is. So having that SDR aspect to it too, to qualify, I think is a very strong point that you made. So if you want to move on to the next two topics, maybe we can even combine them a little bit, where it's building the right team. So building the right team so it aligns with your culture. The two aspects of that is first finding the people that you want to bring into the team in order to scale them up, and then how do you coach and develop these teams. So, Joachim, if you're looking at finding the people that you want to bring into your team, you probably struggle, like a lot of people in a scale-up environment, that you want to be sure that you're bringing on the right person, but also realizing that recruitment is a very time-consuming process. And so what do you look for when you're bringing on new talent, or how do you define the types of profiles that you want to consider?
So initially we defined 4 different profiles that we want to hire, and we're still hiring all of them. But they all are sort of different in terms of kind of which experience they have in the industry, which experience they have actually in sales itself. But we actually want to hire very heterogeneous teams, right? So basically, they all are slightly different in terms of what experience they have and kind of what their backgrounds are. One example could be they are industry experts that can actually challenge the prospects' opinions and ideas. And that is, for example, people who owned a restaurant before, right? Then we have these different profiles, and we are looking then at other values, such as cultural values that lead to key competencies and skills that they all need to have. And this is, for example, with us, coachability, resilience, whether they are good team players or not. And that's sort of how we define profiles, and then build upon that, look into kind of candidates and assess them.
Okay, interesting. And Pedro, I think you're just on mute there, but I'll ask the same questions to you. What type of profiles are you going after when you're looking to bring new people onto the team?
So before entering someone in the team, we have been also using some third-party services, outsourcing some of our lead generation, because at this moment we're very focused on bringing, as I mentioned, larger app developers. So some of this we are outsourcing because we don't see that we have people with the right capabilities to do it. So, and we don't need them 100% of the time. So first we are using these services. On the short term, we'll be hiring, and these people, we have defined some key capabilities, but more than that, we either, for some of the roles, people can learn. So we are trying to focus on people that are smart, driven, but can learn with us, because we don't assume that we'll be convince them we'll be able to bring senior people. For some more app developers, evangelism, we are bringing more senior people because this is something that you cannot learn from. So we depending on the position, we are trying different profiles and spending more, for example, in this app evangelists, because these are key people on the company.
Certainly, and I think that's very interesting, and I do want to come back to that in a minute with your experiences on kind of the outsourcing of it, where I have heard that question come up quite a bit, is, what are the pros and cons? Of course, you have some agencies, if you will, that maybe give it a bad name, but is that necessarily the reflection of the entire situation? But before that, asking Spencer here, I know that we have spoken a little bit before on kind of going after profiles, bringing on the right people into the company. What are you looking for when you're looking to bring on and scaling up the team?
Yeah, so I think it's probably most similar to what Joachim mentioned. There's probably 2 things, one for AEs and one for SDRs I look for. So for SDRs, I really want to sense that they're hungry for it, that they want to learn, that they want to talk to people, get on the phone. It doesn't necessarily need to be a lifelong sales career for them, but do they want to learn is kind of the big thing for an SDR, because it's such a malleable role. For an AE, what I typically love to see, and it's no knock on any of the Fortune 50, Fortune 500s out there, but I love to see a sales rep that's been successful year over year in a non-market leader. So whether that's a startup, whether that's the second best CRM, whatever that might be, it shows that they can build a business case, that they can show value, that they can win in a scenario where they're not relying on marketing or relying solely on brands. So those are probably the two things I look for outside the norm.
And to add to that, I think getting someone from Salesforce, at least in our case right now, would probably not help, because they have entirely different setups. They have huge knowledge bases internally. They have all these support functions that we probably don't have yet. So they are probably not the right fit for the size of the company for most of us.
For sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I know. I've read Corey Bray's book, and he talks about, it's a sales enablement playbook, and he talks about, if you're looking to bring on new salespeople, you kind of have to look at the company you're in and kind of the market you're in too, where, if you have a very complex sale, does it make sense to promote a very junior sales development person into that closing role, knowing that they maybe are lacking a lot of the skills that you need, versus maybe a much simpler or a much more volume-based sale, or maybe someone like that can be more successful. So again, in scaling up, it's not one size fits all, but realizing your market, realizing what you're selling into to kind of determine what profiles you're bringing on there. So Pedro, maybe coming back to what you spoke a little bit about earlier, is kind of your experience with outsourcing. And I know myself, I've actually worked with one company here in the Netherlands who's really doing innovative things, where they're becoming a market leader in the fact that they're being very social, being very personal, and kind of embedding their outsourced agents within their customers themselves. You kind of compare that to agencies that maybe do a little bit more dodgy practice with the outsourcing, have more call center environments. What has been your experience? Is that something you've been satisfied with, or what are your thoughts there?
Yes. So in our case, we have been what they have been doing is we are basically leveraging their previous network. So we are complementing our network with theirs and other senior folks, because we need to grow fast, and for us to outreach large app developers, important ones, and convince them, we have to tap into the right networks. So that's something that we have been using. On the downside, of course, when you outsource some of the functions, you stop listing everything. So you don't get all the feedback loop, you don't get every feedback. And at the beginning, as we are building the product, interacting and so on, we lose some of the things. Is on the first side. And second, of course, we don't control all the process, and these channels have their own interests. So you don't control the full process. But overall, for what we have been working has been positive, because it's been a way for us to complement our network with these top tier developers.
So, and Spencer, Joachim, is outsourcing something that either of you have dealt with before? Has the question ever come up? Do we want to look externally to get this kind of talent, or keep it internal?
So I've never done it, never been in a company that's done it. And we sell to sales teams, so we see it from time to time, where teams have outsourced their sales process. I'd say the pattern that we consistently see is that it's a repeatable, very systematic process, where you can also almost diagram, I'd say, the sales process in like a flow diagram. And it seems like that's perfectly fine for some companies. For us, and what we focus on and what we talk to our customers about is much more focused on how do you augment the sales rep, or how do you make them more efficient, more effective, more impactful in the sales process. So whether it's, with calling, giving them a power dialer to outbound more, 20% more per day, or providing them with better training internally so that they know how to handle objections better. I think that empowerment is the focus from our team's perspective, and typically what I've seen as well.
Same here. Okay. We never outsourced yet. Also in previous companies, we didn't do that. I'm not 100% sure whether that makes sense, just as Spencer said as well. That makes sense to companies that have a somewhat not super transactional process.
Mm-hmm. And where I have seen some companies adopt it is testing the water. So maybe if you come back to the earlier question where we're talking about identifying markets, and so if you're a San Francisco-based company, for example, and you kind of want to explore maybe, is there a market for me in Europe? Finding a reputable agency in Europe that can kind of do a little bit of sales development for you, and you can kind of see what leads come out of that. So before you make a considerable investment and go and open an office in Dublin or wherever, kind of having a better idea of what can come on it based on a few conversations. But if we move on a little bit too, now if we've recruited teams, how do we build the right team and the right culture? And Spencer, maybe it's good to get your thoughts here, because you have kind of gone through this and gotten to a later stage where maybe in the earlier gritty days of things, it's less structured, where a lot of the salespeople have the responsibility upon themselves to understand how the process works, what do they need to get done, how do they do it, and so maybe without that structure, you get more of a culture where everyone's working independently of each other. It's difficult to duplicate the success, and then a lot of companies then come in and structure things as they better understand how their sale works. What have you done at Talkdesk to kind of, have you brought structure? How have you kind of enabled the team to succeed in that sense?
Yeah, so spot on, Tommy. Early on, it was, we didn't really know what necessarily was the predictable sales process or how to make somebody successful every single time they came in. It's still a challenge to do, even though we've done it for a while. But early on, it was like, just jump on, look at my calendar, jump on calls. You don't have to ask me to join. It's totally fine. I'll just introduce you and show you that you're there. Now it's much more, built out, where we have onboarding and training. We have a sales enablement team that's going through the process and building out, the companies that we talked about, the personas, what are their buying methods, what do they object about. So it's much more prepared, I'd say, going into it than the early days, where it was kind of a mad dash to get your first deal in. And now it's more methodical and built around the training portion. But we still do heavily rely on the buddy system and having, an experienced rep work with an experienced or inexperienced AE or working with the SDR. So it's I'd say a little bit organized in the chaos, but still definitely fun to bring new people on.
Certainly. And what have you seen come of this? Like, has there been benefits, like less employee turnover, more people being successful? And was there a point that you got to that you felt that this kind of structure was now necessary?
So I think it got to the point where it was necessary once we, I'd say, moved past that first iteration of the first core team and started to say, hey, these 5 guys have been successful. How do we make it 15, 20? And getting to that next evolution where it's no longer just kind of putting in the hustle and making deals close, and more about how do we actually build the process around it sustainably. In terms of what we've seen, it dramatically helps around things like ramp time, getting your first deal, and having that early momentum and that early success is so critical for our reps here. And I think it's true in any sales process to have that mental state of, I can close, I know how to close here. So for us, it's huge in terms of getting the guys and the women that come on board ready to go.
Interesting. And then opening the same question up to the other 2 gentlemen on the panel, where maybe Pedro, where are you currently with your company? Are you kind of more in the cowboy phase, or have you brought process and structure into it?
More cowboys, but we try to codify the learnings, what has been working, so that we can rapidly pass on to the other members, and we can leverage on the next interactions. We have, for example, an Excel tool and other tools where we try to include all that information so that we passed on. And yeah, basically very focusing on sharing all the information with the team that has been working. That mostly is it.
Okay. And Joachim, anything on your side?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think we do quite a lot of the things that Spencer mentioned already. We do that as well. We recently hired our first sales enablement lead, who's going to formalize it even more, the onboarding and the training, the ongoing trainings, to a point where we also build our internal systems like the CRM system, the CTI, and the sales engagement tools around this in order to help everyone follow the best practices and actually make sure that we have this kind of self-explanatory. So lots of products out there are actually pretty simple in a way that we kind of build them so that customers can use them without knowing the product in the beginning. And that's how we want to build our sales process as well, so that new reps can ramp up as quickly and as easily as possible. And I think it's the same. The sooner we get them ramped up and get them celebrating the first successes, the better it is for the reps and also the company. I think, therefore, it makes sense to do that as quickly as possible, because you're paying the salary of the sales reps anyway. So you rather get them really productive and efficient.
And just to add to that as well, what Joachim mentioned, the big thing that we've done and shifted probably from the early days with the way that we structured our CRM is that the process that we follow, it doesn't really matter whether it's Sandler or CCS or whatever process, it just matters that you follow some process and have a predictable way to talk about it. So for us, to your point, what we've done with our Salesforce, talk to reps about, and they can understand consistently what the process is, where they're at objectively in the sales cycle or in the SDR cycle. So it's a huge step for us that we took, whereas like, let's take what we want to do consistently and bring that process into Salesforce. So it's every day living, breathing it.
Certainly, and I think I'm a little bit biased there because that's where I've made my living, is working on that system side of it. So I'm understanding, our Salesforce instance or our Dynamics instance, whatever you're using, how is it reflecting the sales process that we want to follow? And so, is this system something that's slowing us down and it's preventing us from scaling up even quicker, kind of working against us, or have we been able to administer it in a certain way so it is helping us achieve what we want to achieve is a big part of it, but certainly. But not going too deep into that because it is my world and I'll talk all night. But just, I guess, just a quick question on the training aspect of it. And so if we want to train our reps, I know a lot of people have kind of said looking at more junior reps, and as long as you have the drive and what you need to succeed, then we can kind of teach everything else. What do you find works with training where maybe you have junior reps and you're teaching them more of the sales, or maybe you have also senior reps and you're teaching them new way to do sales, like social or GDPR compliance that they didn't have to deal with earlier. So what kind of coaching and training cadences have you set up for your teams? Maybe Spencer, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, so I think some of the coaching and training, like the junior rep to the senior one, or moving an SDR to an AE, that's something that we always want to promote. We want to set up the structure. So I think things like that, there's the sales enablement. They go through, if they're moving from SDR to an AE, they go through the normal onboarding process for an AE. So there's a lot that we try to do to insulate the process and help them get everything that they need to move to the next phase. But other than that, I think the big thing is just continuously following the process, whether that's following the Salesforce methodology and CRM methodology, or having, for us with the process, we have kind of the initial workshop that we typically do, and then have a 60, 90, 180-day check-in with the different teammates to make sure that they understand, it's I think the big thing with sales, it's not necessarily rocket science. A lot of times it's, remembering the little things and being able to execute on those and go back and constantly revisit them is something that's important and that we want to do.
And opening it up to the others, Pedro, is this something that you've taken a look at too, training and development of your team?
Not at this phase. As I mentioned, we are still in the early phase of scaling, so we're still learning. So we are mostly codifying what works rather than spending a lot of time on teaching, because we're still learning a lot. So we're not yet at this stage.
Okay.
I want to probably only add that I'm a huge fan of diverse teams, because then you have also someone, kind of this buddy system where everybody can learn something from the others. And if you implement this idea, how do you want to do sales at this company, then getting new reps together with and budding them up with new reps really helps to also translate that to the others. And I feel like it's easier to teach sales to people who didn't do it before than to teach the way how you want to do it at a certain company to people who who did it for years already. Just an idea, but I'm not 100% sure whether that's only the case for this kind of the task we are hunting. It's this SMB sales that is probably sometimes easier to teach compared to enterprise sales. But I think still it's true with enterprise sales to some degree.
Certainly. So I know we're just coming up to kind of the end of the 45 minutes here, and I'll pass it off to Randy here in a moment. But before we do that, kind of relating it to the scaling up methodology that we use at Santa Commerce, we actually call the methodology fitting it up, scaling up. And one of the aspects of that is we have a one-word close to every meeting that we have. And so I'll challenge the group here with that. I'm not going to be strict. If you use more than one word, it's fine, but it's just a very quick idea. So we spoke about a lot of the different aspects of scaling up for sales teams. What do you think is the most important aspect to consider while you're going through this scaling up process? Okay, do you go first?
Yeah, people.
People. Nice. Pedro?
More than one word. So having a clear value proposition, because otherwise the sales rep will be all over the place.
And Spencer?
For me, it's focus.
Focus. Very nice. And so with that, I'd like to conclude. I'll pass it off to Randy.
Well, give us your word first.
My word. I shouldn't have gone last because I would have said focus. But yeah, culture is what I would say.
Good. Listen, thanks, guys. And we want to thank our audience for watching this this edition of Scale Up Heroes, and a special thank you to all of our panelists, especially you two, Tommy, for leading the conversation. We invite people to visit our page at scaleupacademy.io to learn more about us and what we do. And if you liked this live show and you found it valuable, please hit the like button, share today's show. I'm your host, Randy Cantrell, and I hope that you'll join us next week when we plan to talk about scaling talent. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.